Hi, everyone. This is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews, and I am your literary ambassador. And today I have on my channel Tracy Lawson. Good afternoon, Tracy. How are you?
I'm great, Queenie. How are you?
Fine. Okay, tell us a little about yourself.
Oh, let's see. I am a dance teacher and a choreographer turned writer. After a 25-year career in the performing arts, I was facing a cross-country move and my only daughter going to college. And I thought, if I ever want to be a writer, this is a great time to do it.
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
started planning ahead. And by the time my daughter graduated from high school, I had one book published and one on the way.
Oh, wow. So, what is your genre?
Well, I've written in several genres. The first one was a nonfiction history book that was based on some family stories. And then after all that research and all the footnotes, it was like the biggest history paper you ever wrote. I thought,
Mhm.
boy, I'd like to make some stuff up and just have it be okay because I made it up. And so that was when I wrote the Resistance series for young adults. And so then the 4-book dystopian series. And then since then, I've written another couple history books, and I've got a historical fiction coming out next year.
Okay. When did you first realize you wanted to be an author?
Ooh, I realized I wanted to be an author in the first grade. We had a program at my elementary school where we were supposed to write a story, and then the moms would come in and they would type on the typewriter the
Mhm,
pages, and they would sew it into the binding of the book and cover it with contact paper, and we would get to illustrate it. And
mhm.
we were supposed to make 2 or 3 of those through the course of the school year. But in first grade, I finished my seat work quicker than the other kids, and the teacher would say, Tracy, why don't you just write a book while you're waiting? I walked out of first grade with 67 books. And you're never going to keep up that pace, obviously, but that was when I decided I wanted to write books someday.
Mhm.
It just took me a little while to get there.
Oh, okay. How long does it usually take you to write a book?
Well, let's see. The very first one took a lot of research, and I wasn't sure what I was doing, so it took me about 20 years, but I could have done it in 5 if I had the internet when I started.
Mhm, mhm.
The internet has just been such a wonderful resource. Even if you're writing fiction, you still have to do research and learn things.
Yes.
And so having the internet's been wonderful. But usually with the Resistance series books, the young adult books, about a year from start to finish. About a year
Mm.
start the writing, maybe a year and a half, because they were kind of overlapping as I went into the series. So you know, anywhere from a year to 3 years, I would guess, would be average.
Okay. Now we could talk about your books that you have.
Okay, let's see. Do you want to ask me questions? You want to go
Oh,
first?
just show the cover and talk about each book.
Okay, so this is Counteract.
Mhm.
This is book 1 of the Resistance series. The Resistance series is about a guy and a girl who meet during a terrorist attack, and they discover that the government is behind the attacks and has been staging and faking terrorist attacks for years to keep all the people frightened and in control. Now, this sounded like a really way out idea when I started writing it back in 2010, and I think in the 10 years that have elapsed since then, we've all started to think, yeah, this could be more true than not true. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
it's so the book, the after the end of the first book, which of course ends with Tommy and Corrine attempting to overthrow the government and failing, and then taking off
Mhm.
and joining the resistance. The second book in the series is called Resist, where they find a community of like-minded people who don't like the totalitarian government and are trying various means to overthrow. And the kids find that it's not easy to start a revolution. It's a lot more
Mhm.
complicated than you think. And
Mhm.
so they latch on to the older people or the people who have been at it longer, and they end up involved in a terrible disaster, which leads into the third book, Ignite,
Right. Mhm.
where they are on opposite sides of the question, because Karine has gone over to the government side, and she's their new spokesperson for this program that's supposed to keep all the children safe. Because in the midst of all these terrorist attacks, they say, oh my gosh, the children need to be protected. The children need to be safe. What if there's not enough food? What if there's not enough health care? So they
Mhm.
want to put I called it the evil Fitbit, to put a Fitbit on the kids that can't be taken off, so that they can all be tracked, so that if a child
Okay.
is lost, they can be found right away. It's like microchipping people, except
Yes. Yes.
they made it like a bracelet, but they didn't tell the parents that it would never come off until it was too late. And so a lot of people want this, safety precaution in place. But the resistance kind of takes a farther sighted view of the whole thing and says, once you put this band on people and they can't get it off, that means for their whole life, they're going to be able to track them forever. And that's not a really good idea. So that then the resistance turns its efforts toward sabotaging this evil Fitbit, which is called the link, because it links everybody together. And that leads us into the fourth and final volume in the series, which is Revolt. And it ends up, that kind of wraps up the series.
Okay. Where do you get your ideas and information from?
Okay. Well, of course, with the nonfiction books that I talked about before, those were based on family stories that had come down, and somebody had left a diary, and I kind of used that as my basis for my story. But with the Resistance series books, that's kind of a fun story. My daughter was in high school when I started writing these books, and she had a friend who was always over at our house eating our food. Everybody's got that one friend who's always over at somebody else's house eating their food. And he was over all the time. And the kids were they're like siblings, and they're still like siblings. They're 24 and 25 now, and they still are just like, buddies. And he was over at our house one day, and he was like, Miss Tracy, you're going to be a real author. And I was like, yeah, I am, because I had the publishing contract for the first book. And he said, I want to be an author when I grow up too. Will you look at some of my work? And I was like, well, yeah, sure, of course, So he was like 15. And so we started working on his short stories, and I'm writing and editing with him about, baseball and broken noses and broken hearts and, typical guy stuff. And then one day we didn't have anything to work on. And he said, well, do you want to just write on a prompt like we do in English class? I was like, sure. So he said, what if everybody's on a mind-altering substance and all thoughts are communal? Go. And I was like, well, okay. It was kind of like the smackdown on the playground. It's like, who can do a better job? So we retreat to neutral corners. We write, we come back, and we share. And I was like, gosh, I really like what you wrote. And he goes, yeah, I like what you wrote too. Well, what we wrote that day, his scene ended up in chapter 3 of Counteract, and mine ended up in chapter 7. So we had this just little exercise, like English class exercise, even though it was about, being on a mind-altering substance, which is probably not what your English teacher is going to give you in sophomore English class. But still, we were like, okay, so this was fun. It was just an exercise. So let's see. We kept writing. We liked the characters. And then eventually it was like, well, where are we going with this? Because I think this has some wheels. And so we said, well, why is everybody on a mind-altering substance? And there were several answers to that question, but the one we chose was because they're being tricked into taking something that's not good for them.
Yeah.
And so then you say, well, who would trick a whole country full of people into doing something that's not good for them? And then you go, the government. And because that's the biggest, baddest bad guy that you can ever have. So right away, we ended up in a dystopia. And that was fun to think, well, what kind of stuff would the government do to say, we're here to protect you, but not really protect you, because they were there to manipulate you.
Yes.
And so that was fun, because I kind of lean toward that way anyway. I don't necessarily think the government is here to make my life better. I think they're here to mess me up more than anything else. And so, but I don't necessarily have this fatalistic view of the world that is in the books. It was just kind of like taking it to an extreme, to make kids think about, what kind of a world would I want to live in? And then say, gosh, I don't want to live in that kind of a world. And then to go, maybe I kind of already do. And so that was the whole, I realized I kind of had a platform once I got partway into the first book. It's like, I want people to think about the kind of world that they live in, and how much interference do you want? How much hand-holding do you want? Or do you want to be free? Because there's kind of like that fine line between we're too free or we're too, not taken care of. And so you're trying to find that place, and, nobody knows where it is. So it was kind of a fun exploration. And I loved my characters, because they were kind of, my kid and her friends would hang out at the house, and I would listen to the kids talk, and it was like, I can create characters from these people very simply. And so, it was a fun series.
Yeah, that was my next question. That was my next question. Where do you get your characters from?
Yeah, now my daughter, while all this is going on, right, and I'm writing with her friend, my daughter's like, I'm not in that, am I? because she was like 15 at the time. And I was like, oh no, honey, mommy could never, capture the essence of you. And then 3 years later, the book's coming out and she goes, oh, but I'm not in it, am I? I said, of course you are, because you take little bits and pieces of people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't take any one person. And, people ask me, well, which character's most like you? And I said, well, all the good characters are just like me, but the evil characters are nothing like me at all.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, everybody's like you a little bit. But yeah, it's because you have to be able to get in their heads and think, how would they react?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you definitely take little bits and pieces of people that you know, but you don't create a character wholesale like somebody else. And that's what makes it fun.
Yes. What is your work schedule like when you're working?
Oh, wow. Okay. Because I still do work in theater. And so right now I'm in between 2 different shows that I'm working on. The high school my daughter graduated from, I started doing the choreography for their musicals when she was a 6th grader. And she's 24 now, like I said. So I've been there for about 12 years, and I do their middle school musical and their high school musical every year. Just got back from doing that, auditions for one of their shows last week. So when I'm in show season, like late October to February, I've also got to be creating choreography and thinking about how would I stage these shows. And I work with the musical director and the drama director on those. So I don't write as much during this time of the year. But after I get back from doing the boot camp choreography workshop, mid-February, then I take off the dance teacher hat and I put the writer hat on. And when I work, I may not work at all on a day, but if I do work, I'm usually working like until the muse stops talking to me. I can maybe work 5 or 6 hours a day. I really like to write in the middle of the night, but as I get older, it's harder to stay up late and do all that. It is. So
what do you do when you're not writing?
When I'm not writing, I like to, we like sports, and we like to, we live in Dallas, and so there's lots going on here. There's always something going on. My husband's a professor, so there's, events at the university, or there's sporting events or travel. And so I do things like that as well. I really like doing sewing and quilting and craft projects too. So I have no trouble filling up my time.
Okay. How many books have you written, and which is your favorite?
Okay, let's see. So I've written the 3 nonfiction history books, and those are all based on family stories. And then I've got the 4 books in the Resistance series, and I've got 2 historical fiction, actually 2 historical fiction. One's coming out this year and one's coming out next year. It's hard to pick a favorite child, isn't it? Because I think of one of them as my ink and paper children. In the Resistance series, I would say definitely it's book number 2. This is my favorite one, Resist, because this is when the characters, they've been so isolated in the first book, and this is where they find community. And this is where all the teenager drama starts up, that he likes him and she does, that kind of thing was fun to write, teen drama. And, but also to see the characters evolve from people who are just being reactive to, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? To maybe I can make a change. And being proactive and starting to grow up into adults. And that was why that book was so much fun. But my new one, the one that's coming out in 2021, is a historical fiction, and it's based on my 6 times great-grandmother. So my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma was a spy for General Washington during the American Revolution. And so that legend of her that has come down through the family, I took that and turned it into a novel based on her adventures.
Wow.
That one's kind of my favorite right now, because I just wrapped that one up and got a publisher for it. And so I'm really excited about that one.
Okay. What do you think make a good story?
Oh, I think what makes a good story is, first of all, lots of conflict. You like to think that somebody is going to have a great life, but that's not what you want to read about. You want to read about people overcoming things, or people, surviving things, or people solving a problem. But I think a person who can be put into a fantastic situation and react in a realistic way so that we believe, a story that you really believe. and a story that's tight and doesn't have dropped storylines and stuff like that in it, because
Yes.
I hate that.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yes.
What's the best way to market your books?
Oh boy. That's always the question, isn't it? I love doing stuff like this and talking to, bloggers and things like that. I also love to do live events. I found that not just like the Texas Teen Book Festival in Austin each year has been a great venue for me, because they bring in big name authors, New York Times bestselling young adult authors. They have a big library of books that kids can buy, but then they also open it up to independent authors like me, because my Resistance series books were independently produced. So I can go there as a vendor with a table, set up my books, and then I can talk to kids all day long about what they like to read and sell books. And I found that this has been a really wonderful opportunity, because those kids know what they like.
Yes.
Busloads of kids coming on field trips, and you're just like, yay, it's a wonderful, fun day. But not only just a book event. I mean, I do book events, but I also do community festivals. Like here in Dallas, they're probably one every weekend. One of the best ones I do is the Parker County Peach Festival, which is over past Fort Worth. And like 40,000 people come to this festival every year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a one-day thing in this little tiny town, and it's you set up your tent, you set up your books, and you just talk to people all day about books and reading, and they'll come through, and the people next to me are selling handcrafted wreaths, and the people on the other side are selling something else. And then there's people selling hot pepper jelly across the way, but everybody's selling something different. And so when they come to my booth, they go, "Oh, books," because I'm not one of 50 or 60 booksellers in one place. And so if I have some books for adults and some books for teenagers, I can usually find something that interests somebody. And so I think the live events, I love reaching out to people that way. It's great to be able to have a good social media presence, but that's more about connecting with your audience so that they know who you are and they want to know more about you and your books. It's really, I think it's hard to sell on social media, and it's hard to sell online. So I personally prefer, shaking a hand and meeting somebody in person.
Wow. Do you read your book reviews, and how do you deal with bad and good ones?
Oh, yay. I've been so lucky so far that I haven't had any really scathing, awful book reviews. So I have had some that hurt my feelings a little bit, or I felt like maybe the person didn't get what I was trying to do. And then you kind of go, oh, I'm sorry that you didn't feel that way, but they took the time to write about it. So you kind of have to be like, okay, they were moved enough by it to say, I really hated this. Okay, well, that's fine. And I don't like every book I read. Nobody does. So I try very hard to just go, okay, that was one person who didn't like my book. I'm probably not going to change their mind. But like one lady one time, the thing that she was upset about was the cussing. And it's not like we cuss on every line, but sometimes people, sometimes different characters react in different ways. And one or two of the adult characters tended to, let fly with some off-color language whenever things got really bad. And she was like, oh, we can be better than that. And I thought, well, she made a big deal about the cussing in the review. And I thought, well, somebody else who reads that review and goes, that sounds like an exciting story. Cussing doesn't bother me. That's not going to hurt me in a lot of other, situations. So I think the most frustrating one that I had was I did a Goodreads giveaway, and it was for the second book in the series. And so this woman got a copy of Resist, my favorite one, got that one, and then she posted a review and she said, I didn't like it because I didn't know what happened in the first book. Okay, so
Yes. Wow.
Gave you a free copy of the second one, and you couldn't download the first one for 99 cents and catch up with the story, or you couldn't just, I take it from where it is. So those are the ones that are frustrating, when they don't seem to get what they're trying to, what you want them to do. And so, but no, I mean, by and large, I've had good reviews, and so I haven't been too unhappy with that. But that one was kind of, like I said, it was just a slap your forehead kind of a moment.
Do your family support you as an author?
Yes, my husband is fantastic. My husband is a professor, but he's also an author. His first popular book came out this year. So now he's like asking me questions about, well, what do I do for this? And what do I do for that?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's had a really great experience. And, so now we're going forward together, and he's like, next year is your year. And then the year after that's going to be my, we're just kind of, but I had 5 teenage nieces plus my daughter when my young adult series came out. And one of them in particular has just been really great. She remembers all the details from all the books. And so when I write the next one, I usually would give it to her first and say, would you look this over and tell me if you find anything missing or that I ought to fix? And she looked at it very critically, but she also loved the series so much that it was a delight to talk to her about it. And I've loved, the family's been supportive, and it's really been neat to have my nieces think I'm a rock star because I write books that they like. So,
okay, you say you have written teen books, and what are those? Do you have those with you?
Well, those are these. Yeah.
These. Okay, guys. I was like, wait a minute, okay. So those are under teen.
Yeah. Those are the teen ones. And yeah, my history books, I think the girls, my nieces like the history books too, because they're about our family, but they're not exciting in the same way. It's like the one is a story of a journal that my great grandfather kept on a trip from Cincinnati to New York City in 1838. Now, travel, of course, was very different in 1838, and he kept a diary of every day of the 55 days they were on the road. So, at first glance, you go, wow, 55-day family vacation on the outbound trip. And then he had to come back. And so, but it was very interesting because he would talk about how much it cost to stay at the hotel. What did you do when the horse got sick? What did I see today that I had never seen before? Because he had grown up in Ohio and he'd never seen mountains. He'd never seen the big cities in the East. And so when they get to places like Philadelphia, he's like, whoa, Nellie, this place is great. He thought Zanesville, Ohio was just, the best place he'd ever been. And if you've ever been to Zanesville, Ohio these days, it's not a city that has flourished in the long term. It used to be a state capital, but it's not the size of Columbus or Cleveland or Cincinnati now. And so when you go through it, he's like, wow, look at all the industry in Zanesville. Well, yes, it was, but it didn't end up on an expressway, or it just didn't flourish the way some of the other towns did. And so it's interesting to look at his viewpoint and see how things have changed and how they're still the same, and how people essentially haven't changed at all in his dealings with people. But it's not riveting reading. And the tough one about that journal was that they got to New York and then it said end of volume 1. And you're like, okay, well, where's volume 2? Nobody's ever seen volume 2. And I kind of think if you left home on August 18th and you got to New York City on October 9th or 10th, and then by the time they transacted their business, saw the sights, and turned around to come home, you'd probably be like, I am so tired about writing about my trip. It's like, can we just beat a path for home and not worry about it so much? So I don't know that he ever even wrote the second, but it didn't have, like I said, the conflict and the resolution. It didn't have what you would expect from a story arc, like a problem to be solved or whatever. It was simply a diary of a trip. So that was, like I said, it's not riveting reading unless you really want to learn about that time period. I found it riveting because it was a family member, so.
Yes. Okay, what is your motivation to write?
Wow. I wrestled with that recently because I had a couple projects in the works and, searching for a publisher and getting the rejection letters and all that stuff. It's hard. And when I had done the Resistance series books, I had a publisher for the first book, and then she went belly up between first and second book. So I kind of had to take the series back over and produce it myself. And I'd forgotten what the rejection feels like when you go out on queries and then they're like, nope, sorry, not for me. Nah, just didn't grab me, and that kind of feedback, it wears you down. It's very hard. When you hear that about 50 or 60 times, you start to wonder why are you bothering?
Yes.
Why are you doing this? Well, and the answer is you have a story to tell. You have a story to tell that will not leave you alone until you get it out there in the world. And especially with this last one, the one set during the American Revolution, I wanted to get it out there in the world because I had heard a history podcast, and they said, we rarely hear history from a woman's perspective. And I thought, golly, I should do something about that. And so that was when I realized I had that family story to tell, and digging in and realizing how the laws were against women at the time, how it was illegal to inoculate against smallpox in certain colonies, how, and just all kinds of things that women would be concerned about today that women were concerned about then, except they had even less of the law on their side then than they do now. Couldn't vote, couldn't own property, couldn't go to court for anything. If you were an orphan, your father was dead, you were an orphan. Your mother had no say over what happened to you. These are all things that I learned while I was researching to write the story of Anna Asbury Stone that I was not aware of. And I thought, gosh, people need to know this stuff. Because when we think about how women fight for what we consider equality today, how elevated we are above what we were 250 years ago is startling. How much better things are. And people need to see where we came from so we can see where we're going. And I just really wanted to get that story out there. And I wanted to share, an exciting story of a woman doing something that was really extraordinary during the American Revolution, because you don't hear those stories as often as we hear stories about the men.
Okay. How can readers find you?
Okay, readers can find me on Amazon. I have an Amazon author page, but if you just go to Amazon and you type in Tracy Lawson, all my books will come up. And also my website is tracylawsonbooks.com.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add before we close?
Oh, golly. I think we covered a lot, didn't we? It was very nice. Yes. I thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you guys will check out my books, because I think I've got something. If you like history, I've got that. And if you like, a good, exciting story, fast-paced, teenagers saving the world, it's good stuff. So thank you very much, Queenie. It was really nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you. This is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews. Happy reading. Bye, y'all.